Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be making another astrology video, and the topic is some aspects that are being made to Mercury as it stations direct, as well as Venus by the planet Saturn. Now this may seem a bit complicated because we're talking about 3 planets here, but this is a planetary configuration that involves 3 planets doing this thing at the same time, right? And Mercury stations direct on May 15th, and Venus perfects its trine to Saturn a couple days before that on May 13th. And to get started here, we'll look at, what does Saturn mean? Saturn, let's make no bones about it, Saturn is the greater malefic. It stands for things like limitations, responsibilities, commitments, boundaries, all sorts of things like that, hard lessons, maturity. But the thing is, so like Saturn, if you understand the force of Saturn, Saturn is associated with the opposition. Because the sun, if you look at the way astrology works, the sun rules Leo and Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn. And so Leo and Cancer are the sun and moon, the signs of the luminaries, right? And Aquarius and Capricorn are opposite to that. And so from this we get the opposition associated with Saturn. Now, what is good about this, or at least a little bit easier, is that what the aspects we have are sextile, which is of the nature of Venus, and a trine, which is of the nature of Jupiter. So, although we're dealing with this planet that can be fairly heavy, it's making aspects which are soft aspects, soft in the sense of not being oppositional, not being conflicted, more harmonious, right? Harmonious aspects. However, there's something about Saturn, the element of Saturn, that still stands for this kind of opposition, right? And this opposition could come in many different ways. It can also mean, like, I often use the image of the wall for Saturn, right? And being a kind of a barrier or a boundary. And it can be, we can be frustrated when we want to push through something and it just feels like there's a big wall in front of us that is stopping us from making any progress. Or it can also be that we want to do something, but the situation we're working with is limited. And we get frustrated by those limits, but we don't have to emphasize the frustration so much with this one because we've got a nice trine to Venus and we've got a nice sextile to Mercury, which is going to be stationing direct, right? And I had selected a few things to read from, and like in my last video, I made this funny statement about the Sun and Uranus conjunction, about how Krishnamurti said that there was no center, right? And one of the things about Saturn is in the opposition is that two sides may have some degree of relative truth, and that you can offer the position that there's no center, but it doesn't mean that I can't pull up a book like this, Centering by M.C. Richards, and still find some good stuff in there, even if I can see I can kind of pick up on what Krishnamurti is trying to lay down. There's a lot of good stuff in this book. I got it from recommendation from Weird Studies. This one actually, I remember Phil Ford talking. I often mention J.F. Martel, but I think Phil Ford was the one who has said that M.C. Richards is his favorite MC, right? So let me see if I can find it here. There's certain bits in this that are just absolutely brilliant, okay? So I'll read this to you, okay? That which we consume with a certain passivity, accepting it for the most part from our teachers, who in turn have accepted it from theirs, is like the food we eat. And food, in order to become energy or will, is transformed entirely by the processes of metabolism. We do not become the food we eat, rather the food turns into us. Similarly, with knowledge at best, hopefully we do not turn into encyclopedias or propaganda machines or electric brains. Our knowledge, if we allow it to be transformed within us, turns into a capacity for life-serving human deeds. If knowledge does not turn into life, it makes cripples and madmen and dunces. It poisons just as food would if stayed in the stomach and was never digested, and the waste products never thrown off. It is dangerous to seek to possess knowledge as if it could be stored. For one thing, it tends to make one impatient with ignorance, as people busy with money seeking tend to be impatient with idlers. Like, how good is that? Oh, so there's a couple of things here, right? I have to admit, like, my last video, I bring up a lot of stuff about the spiritual emergence thing, and that, I don't want to be stuck in the past. I want to move on and I don't feel like I'm that much of a madman anymore. I feel like I've come a long way since the days when I was getting trouble with the psych system. And, I feel a certain sympathy, though, for my brothers and sisters who struggle and get themselves locked up. As I'm more mature, there's certain lessons of maturity that come through, and, things when you're young and you're ignorant, people try to tell you stuff and you just can't hear it, right? And the message, your own ignorance blinds you to what they're trying to get across. And then when you have a bit more years and you have a bit more life experience, you can say, oh, okay, I won't make that mistake again, right? But the thing is, whether you're dealing with young people who are so caught up in their young people stuff and they don't want to hear what you're saying, or if we could be dealing with old people that have gone either senile, or they're like old dogs who can't learn their new tricks. They're old people who are set in their ways. That's both this lead weight of ignorance that Saturn is like, right? And the thing about this is that, we have to, if we have this sort of knowledge, if we have this kind of gift, we have to use it in such a way that we can give it to, like, we can share our gifts in such a way that it benefits others, but we still have to respect their boundaries, and we still have to respect their limitations, and right. But the thing is, if we don't, we're just going to sit on it and don't do anything with it, then that's what makes us into cripples, madmen, and dunces, right? Because we're just become schizos because we can't communicate with anybody, right? That's the one idea that R.D. Laing had, right? That it's not so much, it's a relational problem that people think you're crazy because you don't know how to communicate. And so often that's good for the Mercury stationing direct, right? Because so often the communication isn't so much in, well, I'll just tell you, with Saturn, you have to respect the boundaries. You have to respect the limitations. And even if it's like a psychological block, if it's some kind of a not seeing, a blindness, right? That we have to respect that those blind spots, those areas of leaden heaviness, these kind of stubborn resistances, we have to respect that they are there and work with them in a compassionate way, or else we just become madmen yelling at people, right? We don't want to do that. And maybe I have a quality where I raise my voice and I'm not as soft-spoken and gentle, but whatever. I'm not going to blame my astrology on it. I will try to temper my fiery hotness a little bit, right? But the other thing is that I have often had this problem with, part of the reason why I became an astrologer or decided to try to do it as a business, right, where I would try to make money off of it, I have to admit, is that I often had a kind of a resistance to this whole thing about being an entrepreneur, right? Or these people, like, that it wasn't, or maybe I wasn't sure if people would think I'm a grifter or something, like I'm some kind of a con artist because I'm trying to make money in a dishonest way by doing divination work. I mean, there are certainly people who think even the best astrologers are just a bunch of grifters and con artists and stuff like that, right? But at the same time, what I notice, I don't know, there's something about, I do think you can practice and you can teach and you can provide services of a certain spiritual, whatever you would say, right? Whether you're a divinator, whether you're a Reiki person, or whatever your game is, right? It's like, but I just find that sometimes the people who are the best at making money are kind of sleazy, or I don't want to judge people, but it's always been an obstacle for me where I was like, I'm more interested in reading books and learning philosophy and trying to understand the truth behind it rather than trying to figure out what's the easiest way to make the most money off people the fastest, right? Like that, to me, that doesn't seem very nice. But it's what she says here is that like it's dangerous to seek to possess knowledge as if it could be stored. For one thing, it tends to make one impatient with ignorance, as people busy with money seeking tend to be impatient with idlers, right? So you could be somebody who has who has a lot of knowledge and looks around and be like, what a bunch of idiots out there. But then you could also be somebody who is looking at all these people who are just, sitting on their ass reading books all day and say, get off your ass and do some work, you lazy bastard. No, but the thing is, it's the same ignorance just going different ways, right? And so the point is that I have to be compassionate with other people if they're ignorant in certain ways, just as people have to be compassionate with me if I'm slow to try to get my entrepreneur hustle going. You know what I'm saying? There's something else in here that I thought maybe was worth talking about. Like all these things about, I often, when I do tarot readings, right? I don't do tarot readings very often for other people, although there's people who go and try to do a tarot business. If you guys want me to do a tarot reading for you, sure, I'll do a tarot reading. But I do tarot as my own personal practice, right? And that's another, when you're looking at divination, is that it might be to train people to do their own divination work rather than, me, every time that somebody needs a horror reading, you pay me a bunch of money, right? You do it yourself, right? But when it comes to tarot cards, I notice so often when I'm working in my tarot journal, I start off with the question, should I do this? Should I do that? Should, and so here's another good place to start, right? Must, should, convenient words, exhortations meant to loosen the grip of congealed behavior. Perhaps these perceptions are not the proper work of intellect, but of some other faculty deeply neglected in our education. In any case, at a critical moment in my life, hunger for nakedness and realism and nobility turned to the clay of earth itself and to water and fire. I took up pottery, also, in a sense, by chance. Unforeseen opportunity joined with interest and readiness, like a teaching not consciously sought but purely destined union. For the materials and processes of pottery spoke to me of cosmic presences and transformations quite as surely as the pots themselves enchanted me. Experiences of the plastic clay and the firing of the ware carried more than commonplace values. Joy resonated deep within me, and it has stirred these thoughts only slowly to the surface. I have come to feel that we live in a universe of spirit which materializes and dematerializes grandly. All things seem to me to live, and all acts to contain meaning deeper than matter of fact. And the things we do with the deepest love and interest compel us by the spiritual forces which dwell in them. This seems to me to be a dialogue of the visible and the invisible, to which our ears are attuned. There was, first of all, something in the nature of the clay itself. You can do very many things with it, push it this way and pull that, squeeze and roll and attach and pinch and hollow and pile. But you can't do everything with it. You can only go so far, and then the clay resists. To know ourselves by our resistances. This is a thought first expressed to me by the poet Charles Olson. And so it is with persons. You can do very many things with us, push us together and pull us apart and squeeze us and roll us flat, empty us out and fill us up. You can surround us with influences, but there comes to a point where you can do no more. The person resists in one way or another. If it is only by collapsing like clay, his own will becomes active. And this is a wonderful moment when one feels his will become active, come as a force into the total assemblage and dynamic intercourse and interpenetration of will impulses. When one stands like a natural substance, plastic, but with one's own character written into the formula, then one feels oneself part of the world, taking one's shape with its help, but a shape only one's own character can create. So there's so much good stuff in this book. I'm only getting started with it. I'll probably find more. But there's something about Saturn, this sort of like the resistance of the physical, the structure, the stubborn resistances of the world around you, and the fact that it's not wrong for that to be there, but we see Saturn as being like the greater malefic, that it's a bad guy, like the cold, indifferent Saturn that's not going to change, or that puts up all these and it's like, but to respect both the resistances in others and the resistances in ourselves, the stubbornness of others, and we are like water. Like Bruce Lee says, be like water, my friend. You fill the vessel perfectly. The water, the walls, the rocks in the middle of the stream, the water just flows around them. And if the rocks are very stubborn to be it'll just be slow erosion. It's not going to happen overnight, but eventually, maybe some new shapes will form from the interplay of the water and the rock together, right? It's a wonderful thing, right? So yeah, those are some of my things I wanted to put out there with some help from MC Richards. But I don't know if I should get into this other one. I kind of want to though, because if you notice, I don't have my Philip K. Dick poster in the shot this time, but I also was thinking about Philip K. Dick with this one. I wonder if I should go there with this one. One of the things that have come to mind anyways is that Venus, before Venus made this ingress into Cancer, Venus was making a square to Neptune, right? And Neptune is often associated with things like intoxication, boundary dissolving, all that kind of stuff. And I made a video called Dissolve and Coagulate. And I have to admit, I was not in the best. I was feeling kind of agitated when I made that video, and I used the F word a lot. But yeah, at this point in time, I'm thinking, maybe I should just throw the F-bomb around sometimes. Maybe it's not so bad. I feel like it's almost like, it feels more fake, it's more kind of disingenuous if I try to put on, an attitude like I'm somebody who wouldn't say those kind of words or whatever. Like I'm thinking my just influence of Adam Elenbaas. He's always about, having perfect, of completely clean speech and all. But I didn't never practice with those yoga guys. Those guys aren't my teachers, right? I have to go with my own influences, right? But I'm getting distracted. The point of Neptune, right? The intoxication, the dissolution, all this kind of stuff, and also this issue of drug use. And I am not here to preach, but I've been trying to make an effort to become more sober and live a cleaner lifestyle. And one of the things that I have an issue with, anyways, that I sense that certain friends of mine and certain people in my audience are the kinds of people who, they're not there yet, right? And that I don't know. I'm not. Again, you have to work with people's resistances, right? You can't force anybody to. Some people are stubborn in a habit. People are ignorant. You can't force somebody to change. It has to come from their own initiative and whatnot. But there's often this thing with Venus and Saturn, where Saturn can be like the poorness, like it's Venus is love and harmony, but Saturn can be like a kind of poverty, right? So it's one of the things that came to mind was when I did this other video for I did a video for the Lunar Eclipse, and I called it Life is But a Walking Shadow. And I started off by reading Corinthians, and I always pick a certain translation of Corinthians which uses the word love a lot, right? But the thing is that when I was looking around at the different translations, there's all these other translations that didn't use the word love like that at all. And that there's something I notice, and I think we have a bias towards, it's comforting to know that at the end of the spiritual journey, it's all going to be about love, right? But it's interesting to me that some of these translations use the word charity rather than love, right? And, nobody wants to be a charity case. Nobody wants to feel like they're treated like some charity that, I'm not doing this because I love you, but I feel sorry for you, right? I have to admit, I'm also reading Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and that's a theme that comes up, is that there's people who may, whether your love comes from like a lust for power, like this person's in a very high position, and they have all the money, and they're good looking, and that it's all very attractive to me, and it's all the things that my desires will be satiated. But then the same person could look at that person and be like, I feel really sorry for that person's soul. I take pity on that person. And it's the same person that's in this supposedly high position that's very desirable. You can feel sorry for that person and be, I love you because I feel sorry for you. And then, but how does that make them feel? Maybe do they feel better having somebody feeling sorry for them, even though they did everything they could to be rich and powerful and have everything they want, and somebody feels sorry for them? That doesn't make them feel very good, does it? But then, would they rather have somebody who wants them because it gratifies all their desires, right? There's another question to ask yourself. I think this is very important things to consider with this Venus-Saturn aspect and the Mercury-Saturn aspect. But the whole problem about the charity, the Christian charity, there's all this appeal to charity, like, don't you feel sorry for me? Don't you come look after me? Come help me, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I just have to say that there's a risk in that, and I am not naive, okay? And I have to say that, one of the biggest influences on me, not from being the point of view as a young person. When I was a young person, I had only so much exposure to literature, and I wasn't, they show you Macbeth in school, but like, how deeply does Macbeth sink in when you're a young person? And then when you're listening to different, you're into stuff like, I was into Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth had an album called Sister, right? It was all about Philip K. Dick. And from that Sonic Youth album, I got into the first book that I wanted to read was Valis. Because there's something, what was going on back in those days, back in the turn of the millennia when I was a teenager, there was this whole, when you were on the internet, there was like, this whole thing about atheists, the new atheism. And for a while, I thought, I kind of identified with that because Christians seem like they have their head up their ass. And I have to admit, if I'm going to, maybe the point here isn't for me to stake out and say, this is what religion, which belief I identify with. Because the point is that I don't identify as being a Christian, but I find Christian writers and people who very strongly believe in the values of Christ to be really great people to learn from, right? I don't necessarily subscribe to that particular religion, though, but I still find that I was raised a Unitarian, and we were raised not to put one teaching above the others, but that you don't have to exclude people just because they have subscribed to something different than you, right? And that's how I was raised, right? But there's a problem with Unitarianism is that there's not much of a solid thing to stand on, because we'll just go to this and then that. It's not really, I don't think it's really a real religion to be a Unitarian Universalist. Although, whatever, I do, the Unitarian Universalist Church, I got friends in the church and they've been great allies and support. You know who you are. If you're, I don't know if they'd be watching this though, but I'm kind of digressing. But there's this whole thing, the point though is that Philip K. Dick, even from the point of view of being a young guy, gives you some valuable lessons. So here is my original copy of Valis. I've had this for years, and it's been a huge influence on me. And I'm just going to read the first page of Valis. Because it's one of these things, there's certain novels where it's like the first paragraph and the first page or whatever can be like, it's a classic novel when it starts off in such a way, right? So I'm going to read from first page of Valis here. Horse lover's Fat's nervous breakdown began the day he got a phone call from Gloria asking if he had any Nembutals. He asked her why she wanted them, and she said that she intended to kill herself. She was calling everyone she knew. By now, she had 50 of them, but she needed 30 or 40 more to be on the safe side. At once, horse lover Fat leaped to the conclusion that this was her way of asking for help. It had been Fat's delusion for years that he could help people. His psychiatrist once told him that to get well he would have to do 2 things. Get off dope, which he hadn't done, and to stop trying to help people. He still tried to help people. So that's kind of the thing, right? Is that I think that's one of the problems with Saturn, is that Saturn can be like a heavy weight, and that we may feel very compassionate for the people that are in this Saturn position, the people that are low, the people that are really struggling, the people that are really ignorant, and it may really pain us to see them in these terrible places of depression, of illness, of poverty, of all this kind of stuff, of being suicidal, and that we are compassionate Christian heart, we may want to help them. But when you notice that when you start to try to help these people, it's like you get sucked into the gravitational pull, and before you know it, you're smoking dope, and then you're... Philip K. Dick was a guy who... He ended up having a divorce with his wife, and then he just turned his whole house into a flop house, where he let all the neighborhood drug addicts just loaf around, and he would be, because he's a good Christian guy, he wanted to help them, but he would just get dragged down into the mess with them, right? And it was like, he ended up getting a pretty bad reputation. A lot of people thought he was really just like a fuck up, basically, right? And a lot of Valis is not really a nice story. It's about hitting the lowest of the low, but grace often finds you when you're at your lowest. But when you've been in this game for a while and you've learned some lessons, you don't have to go back to this low. You don't have to bottom out in the gutter necessarily, right? Like you've already been in the gutter. Why go back, right? So. That's what I'm saying. It might be better to respect the boundaries, right? And if you're not it's not saying that respecting the boundaries is also saying that maybe some people's limit is they're not in a place where they are able to just be completely sober, be completely clean, or to be an entrepreneur, or to be everything you think that they should be. Maybe they have limitations, maybe they have resistances, right? And I think the beautiful thing about this transit is that we can respect people's limitations, we can respect people's resistances in a harmonious, peaceful way that's cooperative, and with Mercury there, maybe we can have some communication, we can have some mediation, but it's not the whole story. We still got more astrology transits coming up. So don't get too excited, you guys. One thing at a time here. Stay tuned for my next video, and yeah, like and subscribe if you want to hear more.